Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated to a medieval Pokémon world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Quick update. The series What If fishing system in Food Wars world is now on hold, since we're caught up with the author. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if creating the strongest Strawhat crew by reading manga? What if Transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body? What if martial artist Reborn is Kenichi Shirahama? Please vote in the poll and let me know which stories you'd like to see next. I'll take the second pick and start working on that series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 91, Arceus is watching you. War, slavery, oppression. Beyond the boundless universe, within a vast and mysterious void, the god of creation gazed down upon the world he had crafted. Humanity and Pokémon in that world had fallen to such a state. As the deity who had birthed countless universes, Arceus could not bear to see his creations descend into ruin. And so, not long ago, Arceus summoned a solitary soul from another world, commanding it to change everything. This was not new to him. After all, it wasn't the first time he had intervened. Once before, he had cast a human girl named Akari from the future into the Hisui region, entrusting her with mending the space-time rift torn open by his wayward children. Now, as he watched this new human's journey unfold, Arceus felt a rare sense of satisfaction. Continue forward, human. The divine voice resounded across the void, vast and timeless. Arceus's gaze lingered, unblinking, as the flow of fate continued below. Territory of Healer Lila. Within her home, Healer Lila tended to the injured Pokémon and the young man before her. She carefully applied healing balm to the burns marring their bodies before speaking in concern. Your Highness, what happened out there? There was a minor incident, Lucian replied with a calm nod. But it's been taken care of. I'm relieved to hear that, Lila sighed, the tension leaving her shoulders. Still, you must be more careful, Your Highness. You're the pillar of this group. If something happened to you. Lucian's companion, Gerald, nodded firmly in agreement. From now on, such dangerous matters would be handled by him and his Haxorus. Lucian gave a soft cough. Truth be told, he hadn't expected such a powerful Pokémon to be slumbering within those ruins. Still, perhaps it was a blessing in disguise. His gaze drifted toward the Volcarona egg resting beside him. It was the offspring of a Volcarona that had ascended to near legendary strength. Once, Lucian would never have even dreamed of such a thing. At last, he had found his third partner. The only issue was that, like his Dratini, Larvesta was a late-blooming Pokémon. In the games, Dratini evolved into Dragonite at level 55, and Larvesta, astonishingly, didn't evolve into Volcarona until level 59. Lucian could only stare in speechless disbelief. His eyes then fell upon the Servine standing proudly at his side. Snivy's evolution had far exceeded all of Lucian's expectations. He hadn't imagined that his partner would choose to evolve in order to protect him. Recalling how Snivy had once resisted evolution, Lucian asked softly, Servine, how are you feeling? Are you all right? Servine. The grass-type Pokémon lifted its head proudly, showing no signs of weakness. Seeing that, Lucian smiled faintly. Thank you, Servine. The regal Pokémon turned away with dignified grace. To her, this was nothing more than his duty. As a Pokémon, it was his instinct to protect the human she had chosen. Lucian chuckled quietly. Still the same as ever. At least his Servine hadn't developed the rebellious streak that Ash's Charizard had shown after evolving. That thought alone was a relief. Lord Lucian, is this a monster egg? Lila asked curiously, noticing the gleaming shell beside him. Lucian nodded. Yes. Pokémon reproduce much like we humans do. The mother of this egg was a powerful one. Before she passed, she entrusted her child to my care. She passed away? Lila's eyes softened in sympathy. Birth, aging, illness, and death, these are natural to both humans and monsters. They're part of the world's order. None can escape it. He paused, then smiled faintly. Though perhaps, not all things are absolute. After all, this world still had Pokémon such as Xerneas, the god of life. It was said that when Xerneas' horns shimmered with rainbow light, it shared the gift of eternal life. And in the Kalos region, there also existed Yveltal, the Pokémon of destruction, who governed death itself. The Kalos war weapon of legend was forged by AZ, who studied both Xerneas and Yveltal in his desperate pursuit of their powers. The ultimate weapon was unimaginably powerful, its destructive force rivaled Yveltal's. In an instant, it could drain the life energy from every Pokémon on the battlefield, felling friend and foe alike. What's more, it incorporated aspects of Xerneas' power. By converting the life energy it absorbed, it could resurrect the dead, though the conversion efficiency was abysmally low. But the weapon also emitted a terrifying radiation. AZ himself was altered by it, his body mutating into a giant over 3 meters tall, ageless and unending, surviving all the way into the modern era. After Lila finished tending to the wounded, Lucian returned home with the egg, his Dratini, and his Servine. 5 Minccino were still bustling about, tidying the house. Their eyes lit up the moment Lucian stepped through the door. He set the Larvesta egg carefully on his bed. Until it hatched, there was nothing to do but wait. "Help me look after this egg for a while, all right?" "I need to step out," Lucian said. "Min," came the cheerful chorus. Relieved, Lucian nodded and headed for the settlement's central square. A crowd of villagers and Pokémon had already gathered there, curiously eyeing the group of Darmanitan and Darumaka. As Lucian approached, the onlookers instinctively parted to make way. Darmanitan, he addressed them evenly, "This is our territory." The Pokémon turned, taking in the scene. Humans and many different Pokémon living side by side. As you can see, this is a place where humans and Pokémon share a home. There's no danger here, no one will harm you. If you wish to stay, you'll have peace, purpose, and a chance to help us build something together. Daru. The Pokémon glanced about, uncertain what choice to make. Lucian fell silent, thinking. Darmanitan, being fire-type, can harbor flames reaching nearly 1,400 degrees Celsius within their bodies. They're tremendously strong enough to crush a dump truck with their bare hands. They'd be perfect for helping in the mines, firing clay bricks in the kilns, and even assisting smiths with smelting and forging tools. They also possess peculiar utility. Their droppings retain heat, once used as natural hand warmers to keep people from freezing. Even so, Lucian couldn't help wincing. No matter the practicality, there's always something a little awkward about talking Pokémon droppings. Chapter 92, Black Technology. To better settle the Darmanitan and Darumaka, Lucian specifically called over Ryan Simisear. Following the old mentor leads the new approach, he had Simisear guide the new arrivals on a tour of the settlement. Having lived here for quite some time, Simisear had long since grown accustomed to life in the territory. Pa! With a cheerful cry, Simisear accepted the task and led the Darmanitan and Darumaka around, introducing them to every corner of their new home. The surrounding villagers, who had gathered to watch, gradually dispersed. There was still plenty of work to be done within the settlement. As the population grew, so too did the demand for food. Fortunately, just a few days earlier they had harvested a large crop and stored it in silos, more than enough to sustain both the citizens and their Pokémon companions. That was the wonder of the Pokémon world, resources were abundant. With just a little care and cultivation, food could be produced in great quantities. "Oh, right, Elif, remember to have someone collect the monster's droppings," Lucian reminded him casually. Elif blinked, taken aback. "D droppings?" Lucian nodded. "Yes. Those fire-type monsters produce waste that solidifies into stones that give off heat. Perhaps," he mused, "the high temperature inside their bodies completely dried out any food remnants, turning them into those curious stones.
I understand. Though surprised, Elif nodded obediently. But, Your Highness, what do you intend to use those for? As Lucian's loyal steward, Elif knew his lord never acted without purpose. If he asked for something as odd as monsters' droppings, there had to be a reason behind it. Lucian smiled faintly. If we collect them in advance, they'll be useful once winter arrives. We can use them as natural heat sources. Elif's eyes widened in sudden realization. Ah, I see. I'll have the order given right away. He turned and hurried off, leaving Lucian to return home, barely able to contain his eagerness. The small wooden house was simple, yet filled with warmth. Several Pokémon lounged leisurely inside. Dratini was curled up on its cushion, yawning softly. A few Minccino were gathered around a Volcarona egg, delicately polishing its shell with their fluffy tails. Perched high above, Servine seemed to be dozing, until the creak of the door stirred it awake. It opened its eyes and gazed down at Lucian and the others with elegant pride. "I'm back," Lucian called as he stepped inside. The Minccino immediately bounded toward him, chirping happily. Lucian smiled and patted their tiny heads before turning his attention to the egg. The eggshell was speckled with bright red markings, its pattern resembling the fiery wings of an adult Volcarona. When Lucian placed his hand upon the shell, he could feel a distinct warmth, like holding a giant hand warmer. If one pressed an ear to it, a rhythmic heartbeat could be heard from within, the lively pulse of the larvesta waiting to hatch. It sounded strong, healthy, and full of vigor. The only problem was, even Lucian didn't know when the egg would finally hatch. Still, he was looking forward to its birth. A soft, warm larvesta, perfect to cuddle with during a snowy winter night, would certainly make for a cozy companion. Well, there's no point in rushing it, he thought with a grin. Might as well check what new technologies I can unlock first. As the thought crossed his mind, Lucian's consciousness stirred, and a familiar system panel unfolded before his eyes, his technology tree, now with several new branches appearing behind the ones he had already unlocked. Gathering. Branch 1, Basic Berry Cultivation, Advanced Berry Cultivation, unlockable, Fertilizer Science, unlockable. Branch 2, Basic Herbalism, Advanced Herbalism, Medical Bandaging, unlockable. Branch 3, Toilet, unlockable, Bathhouse, unlockable. Irrigation Canal, unlockable. Animal Husbandry, Basic Processing, Advanced Processing, unlockable. Fishing, Basic Shipbuilding, Advanced Shipbuilding, unlockable. Mining, Basic or Theory, Advanced or Theory, unlockable. Branch 1, City Construction, unlockable. Branch 2, Pottery, unlockable. At present, my satisfaction level is 2,700, Lucian noted to himself. Even though some of these new technologies require 1,000 satisfaction to unlock, that's more than enough. Lucian's eyes swept across the newly available technologies displayed on his system panel. Advanced Berry Cultivation introduced methods for growing rare berries and techniques for tending specialized trees. However, for the current stage of his territory's development, it wasn't of urgent importance. What truly caught his attention was the branch following it, Fertilizer Science. Fertilizer Science unlocked the formulas and techniques for creating different types of fertilizers. Applying these to crops or berry trees would significantly improve yields and even slightly reduce growth time. It was, without doubt, a foundational technology that would strengthen the territory's self-sufficiency. Next came medical bandaging, toilet, and bathhouse. Medical bandaging taught how to craft and properly apply bandages, an invaluable tool for treating surface wounds in both humans and Pokémon. The toilet and bathhouse technologies, while useful for improving living conditions, weren't exactly critical at this stage. The real prize was what came after the bathhouse, the irrigation canal. This technology enabled the construction of irrigation systems capable of channeling water from various sources into the farmlands, forming a network that not only improved crop growth but also helped prevent flooding. Like Fertilizer Science, it was an essential advancement for any thriving settlement. Lucian's gaze drifted further down the list. Advanced processing unlocked recipes for refined foods, things like cheese, mayonnaise, and other processed products. Advanced shipbuilding granted the ability to construct more sophisticated vessels. Advanced ore theory offered knowledge on refining special minerals. One entry in particular made Lucian's eyes widen. It described methods for extracting and processing keystone ore veins. Keystones. How surprising, Unova hadn't even introduced Mega Evolution yet. Further below lay city construction, which, as its name implied, unlocked the knowledge to build fortress walls, defensive structures capable of protecting the settlement from external threats. Then there was pottery, a modest craft that taught the techniques for shaping and firing clay into ceramic tools and containers. On its own, it seemed trivial, but what came after it made Lucian's heart skip a beat. It was something truly unique. A piece of ancient black technology, exclusive to the Pokémon world. Clay Golem unlocks the crafting methods for clay dolls and clay giants. Cost, 10,000 satisfaction. Clay dolls and clay giants. Lucian froze where he stood. Golurk, a ground and ghost-type Pokémon, said to have been created thousands of years ago. Ancient humans molded them from clay, infusing life into them through forgotten rituals. They were designed to protect humans and Pokémon alike, servants, guardians, and laborers, unwaveringly loyal to their masters. And beyond that, they possessed formidable combat capabilities. According to legend, the ancient castles of old had cannon-like recesses built into their ramparts, not for decoration, but to serve as launch platforms for the Golurk's energy blasts. Chapter 93, Thief. But, how was that even possible? To take ordinary clay, the same material used for bricks, and mold it into the form of a Golurk, then make it move. That was beyond comprehension. Lucian frowned, recalling Golurk's typing, ground and ghost. Could it be that the ancients had used souls as their power source when crafting them? Was that how these clay guardians had come to life? It was pure black technology, a forgotten art from an age of miracles. Unfortunately, since the technology was still locked, Lucian couldn't view any further details. He sighed with a trace of regret, then turned his attention back to his current needs. Based on the territory's immediate situation, he chose to unlock advanced berry cultivation, fertilizer science, and toilet. In an instant, the satisfaction points he had painstakingly saved were completely drained. At the same time, a flood of information poured into his mind, knowledge and blueprints appearing one after another. Unlocked, techniques for cultivating rare berries such as Lonsat berry, apricot berry, and starf berry. Unlocked. Formulas for crafting fertilizers that enhance crop growth. Unlocked, construction methods for sanitary toilets. With this, Lucian thought with relief, both the residents and Pokémon of the territory will finally have proper sanitation facilities. He skimmed through the fertilizer blueprints, and quickly noticed several distinct types. One variety was created by mixing crop stalks with buffalo manure, then stomping and fermenting the mixture into nutrient-rich compost. Another used human waste that had been properly decomposed, thankfully, a process the toilet technology now handled automatically. Lucian glanced at the toilet blueprint. It wasn't just a crude pit latrine, it was a complete structure integrating decomposition, filtration, oxidation, and conversion systems, ensuring both hygiene and sustainability. Each fertilizer type served a unique purpose, some accelerated crop growth, while others improved soil fertility. There were no modern chemical fertilizers yet, but what he had now was more than enough. Leaving his Pokémon to rest at home, Lucian made his way to the Lord's Hall, where he summoned Elif and gave his next set of orders: construct the new toilets and begin fertilizer production. Elif immediately departed to carry out the tasks. Lucian exhaled slowly. For the first time in a while, he allowed himself a moment of calm. His eyes returned to the system panel, resting on that intriguing technology, Clay Golem. I need to find a way to gather more satisfaction points, he thought. I have to see how those clay dolls and Golurk are actually made. If he could bring those ancient Pokémon to life, his territory's productivity would skyrocket. Construction of the future city would progress faster than ever. The thought alone filled him with anticipation. Meanwhile, at the Megan Ranch. At that very moment, over at Megan Ranch, Megan was overseeing her brother Chris as he dug out a pond and diverted a stream from the nearby river.
Once the water cleared and rippled softly under the sunlight, Megan gently released 6 Magikarp into the pond. Watching them swim freely in their new home, she let out a long breath of satisfaction.
Alright, this will be your new home. Live well here.
Beside her, Chris also relaxed a little. He turned toward the nearby combi hives, their golden chambers glinting like miniature palaces, and reminded his sister.
Don't forget His Highness Lucian's instructions.
I won't, brother, Megan replied quickly. Chris looked around the pasture, then nodded. You take care of the monsters.
I'll start planting the flowers. According to Lucian's orders, the combi produced honey by collecting nectar.
If the ranch had its own flower field, the bees wouldn't have to fly so far anymore. Without delay, Chris began his work. The flower seeds were of a rare species known as the Gracidia flower, a sacred bloom said to have been brought by emissaries from distant lands.
In the Unova region, such flowers were incredibly rare.
Lucian, fond of flowers himself, had been gifted these precious seeds by the king to decorate his gardens, yet, he had entrusted them instead to Megan and Chris, for the sake of the ranch and the Pokémon.
They couldn't let him down.
Chris made a silent vow to nurture the flowers with utmost care. Meanwhile, Megan carefully approached the beehives. Inside, the golden honeycombs gleamed like a palace made of sunlight, and the sweet aroma of fresh honey filled the air. She watched in wonder, utterly entranced by the sight, until a combi buzzed in from outside, startling her from her daydream. Megan gently knocked on the hive's wooden frame and called softly.
Excuse me.
Inside, the combi and their Vespiquen all turned toward her in unison. It was Megan's first time facing these unfamiliar Pokémon alone, and she couldn't help but tense up, her hands clutching her apron nervously.
I was wondering, is there anything I can do to help you? She asked carefully.
Sensing her unease, the Vespiquen regarded her quietly. The queen could feel it, this human girl wasn't hostile, she was simply afraid.
The
Vespiquen let out a soft, melodic hum. A moment later, one of the combi buzzed over, carrying a small piece of golden honey. It fluttered before Megan and offered it to her.
Ha! Is this, for me? Megan blinked, startled. The combi nodded happily before zipping back to its queen's side. Megan hesitated only a moment before tasting the honey.
The moment it touched her tongue, her eyes lit up.
It's so sweet. The Vespiquen replied with a warm, approving tone. Thank you so much,
Megan said, bowing slightly.
The tension in her shoulders finally eased.
Pointing to herself, she added sincerely. If you ever need anything, please tell me.
My brother and I will do our best to help you. Vespiquen gave a gentle nod of acknowledgement.
Relieved, Megan smiled brightly for the first time that day. That night, Megan and her brother Chris stayed at the ranch to rest. They had already moved their belongings from the old house to this new home. Though the building wasn't large, it was well built and surprisingly comfortable, with several separate rooms. After a long day of hard work, the siblings soon fell fast asleep.
Late at night, the world outside lay silent under the pale moonlight.
High above the ranch, a dark figure glided silently through the air, a motham, its body cloaked in black with an orange stripe running across its abdomen. It had followed the sweet scent of honey through the night sky, drawn irresistibly toward its source. Hovering in the darkness, the motham circled once, its crimson eyes glinting with greed as they locked onto one particular building below.
A hive. Motham, nomadic by nature, wandered endlessly over mountains and fields, forever in search of nectar.
But despite their diet, scholars had long noted something peculiar about this species. Though they lived on nectar, they were rarely seen in flower fields.
Instead, they only became active under cover of night, sneaking into the hives of sleeping combi colonies to steal their honey.
And tonight was no different.
The motham's gaze burned with hunger as it fixed upon the hive below.
It circled patiently, waiting. Only when the entire hive had fallen silent, every combi and even the Vespiquen slumbering soundly, did it finally descend.
It slipped quietly inside.
The scent of honey was overwhelming, filling the air with a sweetness that made the thief's mouth water.
For a moment, Motham froze in blissful disbelief. Was this heaven? It darted forward eagerly, avoiding the sleeping Combi with practiced ease, and began to drink the sticky golden honey coating its tongue. But in its greed, Motham lost itself. A faint rustle escaped its wings, a whisper of sound that echoed too loudly in the stillness. The noise jolted the Combi awake. B. BB. Dozens of tiny eyes blinked open, and the Vespican's royal hum cut through the hive like a blade. They saw the intruder. And their honey thief. In an instant, the once peaceful hive erupted into chaos. B. Chapter 94, Rage Evolution, Gyarados. A brilliant glow radiated from the Vespican's body. She raised one elegant arm and pointed toward the intruder, the thieving Motham, and issued a sharp command to her loyal Combi. At once, the swarm responded, their tiny wings beating furiously as they surged forward, ready to strike with a bug bite assault. But the Motham was no novice. It had clearly done this many times before. With a quick flick of its wings, it darted upward out of reach, clutching its stolen honey. Then it began to flap its wings rapidly. A shower of glittering dust rained down from above, sparkling like a sky full of stars. The Combi beneath inhaled the shimmering powder without realizing its danger. Within moments, drowsiness washed over them. Thump, thump. One after another, the Combi crashed to the ground, fast asleep. Even the Vespican was caught in the cloud. She shook her head desperately, trying to fight the growing haze in her mind, but the hypnotic powder was too strong. Her body grew heavy, and she collapsed beside her fallen swarm, slipping into deep slumber. The Motham let out a smug hum, its antennae quivering with delight. Instead of fleeing, it swaggered deeper into the hive, feasting greedily. Honey. Golden, fragrant, abundant, far more than it could ever dream of. This was paradise. It slurped from comb to comb, gluttonously devouring the spoils without a trace of shame. In a dim corner of the hive, a smaller Combi had escaped the powder's effects. It trembled as it watched the scene unfold, terror and helplessness flickering in its 6 tiny eyes. Gathering its courage, the little Combi darted out of the hive, wings buzzing frantically. It sped through the night air toward the nearby cabin. Through an open window it squeezed, then began bumping its small head against Megan's shoulder. Half asleep, Megan stirred. Rubbing her eyes, she murmured, "Huh? What's wrong, little Combi?" B. The Pokémon cried anxiously, its tone sharp and panicked. Even without understanding its words, Megan could sense something was terribly wrong. The hive, something happened, she asked, suddenly fully awake. B. The Combi nodded rapidly. Without a moment's hesitation, Megan threw on her coat and bolted from the room. In her rush, she didn't even wake her brother Chris. As she ran past the pond, the 6 Magikarp resting there noticed her urgency. Startled, they leapt from the water with loud splashes, trying to catch her attention. But Megan didn't stop. She reached the hive and froze. Under the pale moonlight, she saw it, the wild Motham buried in honeycomb, devouring mouthful after mouthful of golden nectar. Anger surged through her chest. That honey was the fruit of everyone's hard work. "Stop," she shouted. The Motham turned lazily at the sound. Its red eyes regarded the thin human girl with utter indifference before it went right back to eating. Megan's fury boiled over. She grabbed a pitchfork from the wall and stepped forward. "I said stop." The Motham's gaze hardened. A faint pink glow filled its eyes. An invisible wave of psychic energy burst forth. Psychic. Ah! Megan cried out as the blast struck her squarely, hurling her several meters through the air. She crashed beside the pond, the pitchfork clattering to the ground. Splash! Splash! The Magikarp who had been watching everything from the water froze for a heartbeat, then a fierce rage ignited within their eyes. The Motham, its belly full and its wings heavy with stolen sweetness, drifted lazily out of the hive. Its eyes flicked toward the trembling human girl who dared to stand in its way. But then, it felt it. 6 piercing gazes, cold and unyielding, locked onto it from behind. The Mothim turned.
On the pond's moonlit surface floated 6 Magikarp, their normally vacant eyes now filled with fury.
Magikarp. Mothim tilted its head in confusion. Why, you monster? Megan shouted, still shaking but forcing her voice steady. Give back the honey you stole. The Mothim's wings fluttered once, its compound eyes narrowing in disdain. Honey it stole? Ridiculous. This was the spoils of its own skill, why should it return anything? With a contemptuous hum, the Mothim beat its wings.
A flurry of shining scales burst forth, swirling into a howling gust, silver wind. The glowing gale swept toward Megan, its shimmering dust cutting through the night like knives of light. Megan instinctively threw up her arm to shield her face. She never saw what happened next. Behind her, the pond suddenly flared with an otherworldly white glow. The 6 Magikarp, once small and helpless, convulsed within the light, their bodies stretching, twisting, scales flaring like molten metal. A low roar rumbled through the air. In the span of a heartbeat, 6 enormous serpentine forms erupted from the water, Gyarados. Their bodies coiled high above Megan, scales gleaming like armor, eyes burning with primal rage. Whoosh! 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 The air trembled as the 6 dragons rose in unison, their gazes locked on the Mothim that hovered mid-air. The thief froze, its wings faltering. The honey slipped from its claws, tumbling to the ground. A heartbeat later, one Gyarados opened its maw. Inside, a milky white sphere of light gathered, growing brighter and brighter, until it burst forth as a massive beam of energy. The hyper beam roared through the night. The blast struck the Mothim squarely. For an instant its body glowed like a falling star, then it vanished into the darkness beyond the hills. Silence. Only the faint hum of the air remained. The nearby Combi, still dazed from their earlier battle, stared wide-eyed at the scene before them. Megan slowly lowered her arm, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. When she opened her eyes, the intruder, the honey thief, was gone. She blinked in disbelief. The hive was safe, but something felt off. A shadow moved behind her. Cautiously, Megan turned and froze. 6 enormous serpentine beasts loomed over her, their jaws massive, their scales glinting with reflected moonlight. Aya Iowa! Her scream echoed through the ranch. She stumbled backward, falling onto the grass, unable to move. But the 6 Gyarados didn't snarl. Instead, their monstrous faces softened with almost childlike innocence, confused by her fear. The commotion jolted Chris awake. Hearing his sister's cry, he bolted from the house, eyes widening at the sight of the towering dragons. Without hesitation, he ran to her side, pulling her behind him protectively. Moments later, the noise drew the attention of the patrolling knights. Torches flickered in the dark as they rushed to the ranch, and froze when they saw the 6 Gyarados looming over the pond. By the gods! One stammered. Another shouted, panic in his voice, go! Summon Lord Geralt and Prince Lucian. These were no ordinary Pokémon, they were far beyond the knight's ability to handle. But none of them noticed what was truly remarkable. The 6 great beasts made no move to attack. They simply watched Megan and Chris quietly, their crimson eyes calm and almost gentle. Chapter 95, Larvesta. When Lucian arrived in haste, Servine and Dratini at his side, he was met by the sight of the Knights of the Order standing in formation, their weapons drawn as they shielded Megan and Chris behind them. Before the group loomed 6 enormous, ferocious shapes, their serpentine bodies coiled in the moonlight, eyes glowing faintly red. Gyarados. Lucian stopped in his tracks, momentarily stunned. 6 of them? Your Highness Lucian, please be careful, cried Geralt, rushing up beside him. Lucian's gaze shifted toward the pond, and his heart steadied. The Magikarp that had once lived there were gone. 6 Gyarados now rose in their place. The connection was clear. Lower your weapons, Lucian commanded calmly. Your Highness, one of the knights asked in confusion. Can't you see? Lucian replied, his tone even. They haven't attacked anyone.
The knights hesitated, realizing he was right.
For all their terrifying appearance, the 6 Garridos had made no aggressive move.
Lucian stepped forward and turned to Megan. What happened here? Megan, still shaken, took a breath. A wild monster broke in. It stole all the honey we'd worked so hard to make. At that moment, a combi buzzed over, landing beside them. It looked up at the 6 Garridos and let out an excited bee. Lucian blinked. You mean, they drove that magical beast away? B. The combi nodded vigorously. What?
Megan gasped, staring at the combi in surprise.
Lucian smiled faintly and looked at her. Megan, haven't you realized yet?
Realized what? She asked, puzzled.
These 6 beasts. Lucian began softly. You've been caring for them all winter, haven't you?
You worried they'd get cold, so you built them a water tank inside your house.
Megan froze.
Her eyes widened as she began to count under her breath.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Her voice trembled.
Don't tell me, those 6 little fish. Lucian nodded. That's right.
They're your Magikarp.
He smiled reassuringly. And if I'm not mistaken, they evolved to protect you.
For monsters, that's a wonderful thing. It means they've grown stronger.
Megan's eyes filled with disbelief as she looked at the great serpentine forms towering before her. Her little fish had become this?
They were enormous, their fanged jaws and muscular bodies radiating power. Yet, beneath their intimidating appearance, she could see something else, something gentle. If one looked closely, their eyes held not anger, but a faint trace of hurt. Gathering her courage, Megan stepped toward the pond. She stood before them, craning her neck to meet their gaze. The Garridos lowered their heads, meeting her eyes with quiet expectancy.
Are you my little fish? She whispered.
One Garridos let out a deep, rumbling roar.
Roar!
Megan smiled through her tears. She reached out a trembling hand, pressing it gently against the warm scales of the nearest Garridos. Then, moved by emotion, she leaned her forehead against its body.
Thank you, she murmured. Thank you for protecting me.
The Garridos' eyes softened. It closed them slowly, letting out a low, contented growl. The others joined in, their massive tails rippling gently through the water, an unspoken harmony of affection and loyalty. They were grateful too. For Megan's care, her warmth, her kindness. They loved her, and wanted to stay by her side forever. Lucian watched the touching reunion, his expression calm but faintly wistful.
All right, he said at last, his voice steady. It's over now. Everyone, stand down and return to your duties. Yes, Your Highness.
The knights replied, relief flooding their faces. Soon, the ranch grew quiet again, the patrol dispersing into the night until only Lucian and Gerald remained by the water's edge. Gerald watched the great beasts curiously, then turned to Lucian.
Your Highness, can all magical beasts evolve like this?
If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Gerald would never have believed that those ordinary creatures, those sluggish fish in the mud and river, could transform into such majestic beasts.
Lucian smiled faintly.
Perhaps.
Monsters are incredible beings. After you spend enough time with them, nothing about them feels strange anymore. Gerald nodded thoughtfully and asked no further questions. After a while, Megan walked back to Lucian, her expression glowing with gratitude. She bowed deeply. Thank you, Your Highness Lucian. Lucian blinked in mild surprise. Thank me? For what?
Thank you for letting me meet my little fish again, Megan said earnestly, her eyes moist but smiling.
Lucian's expression softened.
He turned his gaze to the 6 towering shapes resting peacefully in the pond. Those little fish now have a name, he said gently. They're called Garridos.
Garridos. Megan repeated the word under her breath, as if savoring it. I'll remember it. Lucian nodded approvingly. Take good care of them.
Garridos are powerful beasts. With them watching over the ranch, you won't have to worry about wild monsters invading again.
Yes. Megan said quickly, determination in her voice. Behind her, the Motham was long gone.
In the hive, the Combi and their Vespicans slowly stirred awake. Though much of their honey had been stolen, the timely intervention of the Garridos had saved most of it.
Satisfied that all was well, Lucian gave a few more words of advice before turning back toward his estate.
Later that night, he stretched as he entered his cabin. "That's enough excitement for one day," he murmured to his companions.
"Go rest, both of you."
Servine yawned delicately, curling up near the hearth, while Dratini coiled comfortably into its cushion. Lucian lay down as well, only for a sharp crack to sound beside him.
Crack! He sat up instantly.
On the nightstand beside his pillow, the Larvesta's egg, the one he had guarded for so long, was breaking apart.
A wave of scorching heat filled the air, raising the room's temperature several degrees in an instant. Lucian's eyes widened.
The eggshell split open, and from within emerged a small Pokémon covered in soft white fur. Two brilliant blue eyes gazed up at him with fiery determination.
"So it's finally time," Lucian whispered, a smile tugging at his lips. "The Larvesta has hatched."
As he reached out, the familiar system panel appeared before his eyes, lines of glowing text scrolling rapidly.
Pokémon, Larvesta. Type, Fire/Bug. Gender, male. Ability, Flame Body. Moves, Fiery Dance, Flare Charge, Bug Bite, Flare Blitz, Flame Will, Ember, String Shot, Flamethrower, Sunny Day. Friendship, 80. Pokémon Record, Year 149 of the Royal Calendar. Larvesta was born.
Lucian's eyes widened further.
"Wait, what?"
He scanned the move list again in disbelief.
Fiery Dance. Flamethrower. Flare Blitz. Sunny Day. Flame Wheel. Every move was powerful, moves a newly hatched Pokémon shouldn't even be capable of. How could a newborn know all this?
Lucian thought, his mind racing.
Then realization began to dawn.
By all logic, this Larvesta should have hatched long ago.
Yet for some reason, its development had been delayed, its life force unstable.
To keep it alive, its mother, the Volcarona, had poured every ounce of her flame into nurturing the egg, year after year, century after century. Before she perished, she had performed her final fiery dance, transferring the very essence of her life's flame into the egg, a mother's last gift to her child.
Could this be the reason? Chapter 96, Container.
Newly hatched Pokémon require not only careful attention from their trainers but also a steady source of nourishment rich in essential nutrients. In the modern era, trainers typically use moo milk, fresh milk produced by Miltank, to feed newborn Pokémon. Moo milk is known for its exceptional nutritional value and energy content, making it the ideal food for both humans and Pokémon of any age.
Unfortunately, there were no Miltank yet in Lucian's territory, so he could only make do with a substitute, the sap produced by Shuckle.
A maid soon arrived carrying a small bowl of the sticky, golden liquid, which Lucian placed in front of the newly hatched Larvesta. Nearby, Dratini and a few Minccino gathered around curiously, studying their new companion.
"Hungry?"
Lucian said softly.
"Larvesta, this is Shuckle's sap. Go ahead, try it."
The little Larvesta blinked its bright blue eyes at the bowl, then leaned forward and began to lap it up eagerly.
"Woo!" Dratini's eyes sparkled with delight. This newborn Pokémon was so small. "This is Larvesta," Lucian explained gently. "From now on, it's part of our family."
Newly hatched Pokémon are often much smaller than one would expect, but that stage never lasts long. Within a week or two, their bodies grow rapidly to a healthy size.
That's the wonder of Pokémon life. Lucian studied Larvesta carefully. Even as a hatchling, it possessed astonishing energy. With its inherited Volcarona flame, its firepower likely surpassed even Dratini and Servine in raw potential.
That meant that long before it ever evolved, this Larvesta would already have significant combat strength. He was eager to see how powerful this Volcarona could become, but now was not the time. Newly hatched Pokémon were still fragile, they needed warmth, care, and time. After finishing the sap, Larvesta gave a small burp, then blinked sleepily at Lucian and the others, as if silently recognizing them. Moments later, it began to drift off to sleep. Lucian smiled, dimmed the lamp, and soon the cabin was filled with peaceful breathing, the quiet of a trainer surrounded by those he cared for. The next morning, Lucian went to the Lord's Hall to handle the day's affairs. As he walked, the sight of his companions following behind made him sigh with a wry smile. "It's really inconvenient not having any Pokeballs," he muttered. With only 3 Pokémon, it was manageable, but if he caught any more, they'd end up trailing him everywhere like an entourage. But there was no way to rush technology. That would come in time. He turned to his partners. "Servine, Dratini, stay home today and help me take care of Larvesta, alright? I'll be back once I'm done." Both Pokémon nodded obediently. Lucian chuckled, patting their heads one by one before setting off toward the hall. When he arrived, the place was already bustling. The old butler Relief, the blacksmith Morik, and the designer Elena were all waiting for him. The moment Elena saw Lucian, she rushed forward excitedly, clutching a rolled-up blueprint. "Your Highness, where did you get this design for the toilet system?" Lucian replied casually, "I drew it myself." Of course, the truth was that he'd unlocked it from the toilet branch of his technology tree. In this era, sanitation was still primitive. Even the grandest cities lacked proper facilities. In the royal capital of Eindhoven, toilets were little more than wooden booths jutting from the outer walls, holes cut into planks where waste simply dropped to the streets below. As for commoners and slaves, it was best not to imagine. The technology Lucian had unlocked, however, was far beyond that, a complete waste management system integrating decomposition, filtration, oxidation, and fertilizer recycling. That was why Elena's expression had been one of sheer disbelief when she first saw the blueprint. Upon hearing Lucian say that he had drawn it himself, her eyes widened even further. "Your Highness, you can draw blueprints," she exclaimed in astonishment. Elif, ever the composed butler, looked mildly offended by her surprise. "As royalty," he said, straightening his back, "His Highness has been educated in painting, music, and design since childhood." He huffed slightly. "A simple blueprint such as this is hardly beyond him." Lucian fell silent for a moment. "Right," he said finally, coughing twice to change the subject. "Ahem. In any case, Elena, proceed with construction according to the design. Also, you can ask the Doug trio to assist with digging the underground sewer system. They're far more efficient than shovels." "Yes, Your Highness." Elena responded immediately, bowing before hurrying off to organize the work. Lucian then turned toward Morik, the blacksmith. "Morik, how's the project with the apricorn and the cotton stuffing coming along?" "It's complete, Your Highness," Morik said proudly, stepping forward and presenting a round, red apricorn fruit. Lucian pressed a latch at its center, and the fruit split neatly in two. The inside of the lower half was lined with a layer of fluffy white cotton, soft as a cloud. Lucian's eyes lit up. He turned to Geralt's Haxorus, who stood nearby. "Geralt," Lucian said, "have your Haxorus give it a try." Geralt blinked in confusion but nodded, stepping aside to give his command. "Haxorus, go ahead." The dragon-type Pokémon gave a low growl and then, in a flash of red light, was drawn into the apricorn. The onlookers gasped. The air was thick with tension for several seconds until a crimson beam flickered again, and Haxorus emerged, unharmed. "How was it?" Lucian asked. "Any discomfort?" The dragon Pokémon tilted its head thoughtfully, recalling the sensation. Then it shook its head and gave a low rumble of affirmation. "Hax!" Morik's eyes shone with excitement. "Your Highness Lucian, your method worked." Lucian allowed himself a satisfied smile. "Morik, starting today, begin producing as many of these as possible. If you can't manage alone, recruit some apprentices to help." "Yes, Your Highness." Morik replied eagerly. The crafting process was not simple. Each apricorn shell had to be hollowed, lined, and fitted with smelted iron rings to form a stable structure. Even with skilled hands, it could take a full day or more to complete one. This early Pokeball design lacked the energy-based capture system of the modern era. It couldn't actually capture Pokémon, only serve as a temporary stasis container. But for Lucian's developing territory, even this primitive version was a major step forward. Lucian carefully stored the prototype ball and turned his attention to the rest of the reports. Once he confirmed everything was proceeding smoothly, he dismissed his people with a wave. The following morning, the territory was already bustling with activity. Lucian didn't immediately return home. Instead, he decided to make an inspection of the ongoing construction. Under Elena's direction, and with the combined efforts of workers and Pokémon alike, the town was transforming rapidly. New houses, built in elegant medieval stone and wood style, rose one after another from the earth. Chapter 97, The Merchant's Visit. Workers bustled about the construction site, their voices mixing with the rhythmic clang of tools. Beside them, Makhok and Darmanitan cooperated seamlessly, hauling stacks of red bricks fresh from the kiln, balancing heavy timber beams across their shoulders, and carrying them to the foundations. Other laborers spread mortar, laying each brick carefully to form solid, sturdy walls. Lucian surveyed the scene with satisfaction. According to Elena's blueprints, the town's layout was already about 1/5 complete. It was now April, and at the current pace, the entire town would be finished by October. Watching the two Makhok move effortlessly across the worksite, Lucian couldn't help but think. If only I had a few more Makhok like them. The construction would progress twice as fast. Unfortunately, Makhok weren't native to this region, and none had been spotted near his territory. Just as he was mulling over how to recruit more, Elif came running up, slightly out of breath. "Your Highness Lucian, traveling merchants have arrived." "Traveling merchants?" Lucian raised an eyebrow, then straightened. "Take me to them." "Yes, Your Highness." Led by Elif, Lucian soon reached the open square near the edge of the settlement, where a small caravan had set up camp. To call them simple traveling merchants would have been an understatement. It was a full caravan, about 10 people strong, with sturdy buffalin pulling the heavy wagons loaded with goods. Crates and barrels filled the carts, some covered with cloth, others open to reveal their wares. Already, curious townsfolk had gathered around, coins clutched tightly in their hands as they bartered for items rarely seen here. Lucian's sharp gaze swept over the assortment. Salt, handkerchiefs, seeds, tools, and even several types of berries, small luxuries in a frontier town. But among the crowd, many stood back, empty-handed, former slaves who still had no money to spend. They could only watch with longing eyes. Then, movement caught Lucian's attention. Chris, Megan's older brother, was walking toward the merchants, carrying a large jar of honey. Lucian watched as Chris spoke with one of the traders. The man examined the jar, nodded approvingly, and handed Chris a few silver coins in exchange. Moments later, Chris happily picked out 2 sets of ceramic tableware from the merchant's cart. The bystanders murmured, eyes filled with envy, then curiosity. If Chris could trade honey for silver, perhaps they could do the same? If we raised beasts like Megan and Chris. If we could harvest honey, wool, or berries, we could trade too. Hope flickered across the faces of the townsfolk. For the first time, they saw a way to earn money with their own hands. Of course, none of them realized that Lucian's mind was already running far ahead of theirs. Elif, he said quietly, arranged to purchase some necessities from the merchants and bring their leader to the Lord's Hall. "At once, Your Highness." Back in the hall, Lucian took his seat just as Elif entered again, this time leading a bearded middle-aged man in a travel-worn coat. The man bowed respectfully. "Greetings, my lord. I am the leader of this caravan." Lucian nodded. "Welcome to my territory. I am Lucian. May I ask where your group hails from?" "We come from Sanyao town, south of the kingdom," the man replied. "We've been traveling across the realm, trading and selling goods gathered from other lands." His name, as Lucian soon learned, was Zach. He explained that his group hadn't known there was even a territory out here. It wasn't until they passed through a small riverside village that they overheard rumors of a hidden settlement upstream, led by someone connected to the royal capital.
Curious and opportunistic, they decided to investigate. After Zach's brief account, Lucian nodded. I see.
Zach tilted his head slightly.
May I ask, my lord, what business you have with us?
Lucian smiled faintly, amused that the man had already guessed his intent. Why, to trade, of course, he said easily.
Judging from your caravan, you must have traveled to quite a few places, haven't you?
Of course. Zach said with pride, his beard twitching as he spoke.
We've traveled through the Cloud Territory, Standing Surge Territory, and even the Seven Treasures domain. We've visited the royal capital countless times.
Then, his expression darkened.
It's just a pity.
I've heard troubling news from the capital lately.
Lucian frowned slightly. What kind of news?
I heard from some noble contacts, Zach said in a low voice, that the eldest and second princes have both left the royal city, each now holding the north and south of the kingdom.
Soldiers are being recruited everywhere. It feels as if war could break out at any moment.
His tone carried both worry and fatigue.
If it comes to that, I just hope they won't close the borders.
Once that happens, caravans like ours will be the first to suffer. Lucian froze, his thoughts spinning. His brothers?
Already moving to seize territory? A civil war between the northern and southern kingdoms of Unova? He clenched his jaw. The situation was worse than he'd expected. They weren't ready for this, not yet.
His town, his people, his Pokémon, all still in the early stages of growth. The only small comfort was their isolation. This frontier lay on the far border of the kingdom, remote, surrounded by wilderness.
Even if war erupted, it wouldn't reach them immediately.
There was still time to develop. To prepare. Lucian's eyes refocused on the merchant standing before him.
Zach, he said calmly, are you interested in making a deal? Zach blinked. A deal?
That's right. Lucian leaned back slightly. My territory needs a large supply of livestock and poultry, chickens, cattle, sandheap. In addition, he continued, I want you to procure 2 specific monster species for me, Mockamp and Conkeldurr. If you can bring them here, I'll pay you handsomely. At a gesture from Lucian, Elif stepped forward and opened a nearby chest. The moment the lid rose, a dazzling glow filled the room. Gold coins, silver bars, and polished gemstones shimmered under the torchlight, piled high enough to make even the seasoned merchant's eyes widen.
Zach's mouth went dry.
He had traded for years, but never in his life had he seen so much wealth gathered in one place.
So?
Lucian said lightly, resting a hand on the armrest.
Are you willing to take this commission? Zach's merchant instincts stirred.
Ordinary livestock were easy enough to buy from villages along the southern plains. As for the monsters, Mockamp and Conkeldurr, he had seen both used as labor or guards in larger cities.
With enough coin, obtaining a few would be no problem at all.
That's simple enough, Zach replied, a confident smile spreading across his face.
Consider it done. Lucian nodded, entrusting the details to Elif.
Coordinate the quantities and prices with him.
You'll be compensated fairly upon delivery.
As Zach turned to leave, Lucian paused, his tone suddenly more casual.
Oh, one more thing, he said. Have you ever heard the name Lacunosa? Lacunosa? Zach repeated, thinking for a moment.
No person by that name, but we did pass through a small settlement called Lacunosa Village.
Lucian's pulse quickened. Lacunosa Village? Where is it? Not far, Zach answered. If you keep heading northeast along the river, it's about a week's journey. Maybe less, if the roads are clear. Chapter 98, Prelude to War. Lacunosa town was very close to their territory.
No, strictly speaking, it was still just village for now. For Lucian, that was undoubtedly good news. Not only did they now know the exact location of Lacunosa village, but this also meant they could pinpoint their own position within the Unova region. Lacunosa lay in the far northeast of Unova on the map,
So their current territory must also be somewhere in the northern reaches of the region. Sir, is there anything else you'd like to ask? Zack inquired. Lucian returned to his senses and shook his head. Nothing for now. But if you happen to have a map of the kingdom, I'd like a copy. A map? Zack grinned.
You're in luck, our caravan always carries one.
We travel all across the land, we can't go anywhere without a map. He left the hall and soon came back carrying a rolled-up parchment.
Zack presented it respectfully, and Lucian took it, spreading it out across the desk.
It was a detailed parchment map showing the major routes and settlements across the Unova kingdom. Minor trails branched off here and there, but most of the trade roads followed safer, well-maintained paths. Like Unosa village. Lucian traced the spot with his finger. Just as Zack had said, it was located on the northeastern border of the kingdom of Eindhoek. Following the clues, Lucian's gaze drifted downward to a vast, open plain bordered by snow-covered mountains. A wide river snaked through the landscape, running south until it met the sea.
No towns were marked nearby, only untamed wilderness.
That had to be where they were now.
To the west lay the main body of the kingdom of Eindhoek, perched along a mountainous spine shaped like a sleeping dragon.
That must be the legendary dragon vein. Consider this map a small gift from me, Zack said with a smile. He'd already glanced around the territory before arriving.
Though still in its early stages, there were clear signs of progress, sturdy new buildings rising in the distance, workers and Pokémon laboring together. This place had real potential, and Zack knew that if trade flourished here, there would be a fortune to make.
Lucian accepted the map without hesitation.
The arrival of merchants would only help the territory grow. Isolation could not last forever, and there were many materials they couldn't yet produce themselves.
You may go, Lucian said. Then I'll take my leave. Zack bowed and exited the hall.
Left alone, Lucian studied the parchment, turning over Zack's words in his mind.
His two older brothers had already left Eindhoek, one ruling the north, the other the south, and both were gathering armies. Was this the first sign of war? Had they already awakened Zekrom and Reshiram?
According to legend, Pokémon were like living weapons of mass destruction, rarely unleashed, but impossible for any ruler to ignore. I need to go to Lacunosa village and confirm Kyurem's exact location, Lucian thought. But there was a problem.
Would Kyurem acknowledge him? Would it lend its strength to his domain? Or would it demand a battle first, forcing him to defeat it to earn its respect? Lucian considered his current power.
A young Dratini, a promising but still developing Larvesta, and a Servine, his only battle-ready partner, yet doubly weak to ice. They had no chance of victory against Kyurem as they were now. I'll have to approach differently, Lucian decided.
If strength won't work, I'll try diplomacy.
Perhaps he could offer to help Kyurem recover its missing essence, then, when the time was right, united with Reshiram or Zekrom to become White Kyurem or Black Kyurem. But before any of that, there was something more immediate to handle. Now that the territory had finally taken shape, it was time to form an army, not a conventional knightly order, but a new kind of force entirely, an army built upon the partnership between humans and Pokémon. Lucian had already formed a rough plan in his mind.
He summoned his knights, those led by Geralt and Ryan, to the training grounds. A row of armored knights stood neatly in formation.
Geralt and Ryan stood at the front. Geralt's expression was calm as always, while Ryan looked puzzled by the sudden assembly. Ryan was the first to speak.
Your Highness, do you have a new mission for us? Ryan, mind your manners, Geralt chided.
Lucian raised a hand lightly.
It's fine.
He looked across the knights, his tone calm yet firm.
I called you all here today for one reason. Everyone's attention focused on him. Lucian's next words struck like a thunderclap. War is coming.
A wave of unease rippled through the gathered knights, shock, confusion, worry. Geralt's brows furrowed, he already suspected what Lucian was about to say. My two elder brothers have left the capital, Lucian continued, his voice heavy. They've taken control of the north and south of the kingdom and begun recruiting soldiers across the land. If nothing changes, they'll soon plunge the realm into war.
He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. With our current strength, we can't hope to match their armies head-on. But I want to hear your thoughts. The knights exchanged uneasy glances. Ryan's face paled. War? Could the princes really be marching on their territory? What could they possibly do against royal armies? But Geralt didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, dropped to one knee, and placed his fist over his chest in a sullen knight's salute. I, Geralt, swear to follow Prince Lucian unto death. For a heartbeat, silence hung in the air, then every knight followed his lead. Armor clattered as they knelt, their voices ringing together. We swear to follow Prince Lucian to the death. Humility. Honesty. Compassion. Courage. Justice. Sacrifice. Honor. Soul. These were the 8 virtues upon which their knighthood was founded. Lucian had led them through hunger and danger, had given them hope and purpose. To abandon him now, out of fear, would be to trample upon everything they stood for. Better to die protecting their home than to live as cowards. For a knight, a glorious death in service of one's lord was the highest honor. Chapter 99, Building an Army. Stand up, all of you. Seeing his knights kneel in unison, Lucian couldn't help but smile and shake his head. It's not as if we have no chance at all. The knights froze, exchanging puzzled looks. Lucian's eyes swept across them. That was the bad news just now, he said calmly. Now for the good news. He didn't keep them guessing for long. As far as I know, the war hasn't broken out yet, it's still only at the stage of recruitment. And even if open conflict does erupt, our territory lies in a remote corner of the kingdom. It'll take time for the flames of war to reach us. That was the advantage of the vast and sparsely settled Pokémon world. So, Lucian concluded, we still have time. And that's why I've gathered you all here today. Geralt thought for a moment, then asked, Your Highness, do you already have a plan? Lucian nodded slightly. Tell me, what do you think of the power of magical beasts? The question caught the knights off guard. For most of them, seasoned warriors trained in the royal capital, Pokémon were terrifying, yes, but hardly invincible. Only Ryan, who had fought beside Pokémon before, seemed to understand. His eyes lit up. Your Highness Lucian, I understand what you mean. We can use their power. Geralt's expression turned thoughtful. Lucian smiled. Exactly. To be honest, I intend to create an army, a magical beasts army. For example, each person would lead a team of Agrons, forming a brand new legion. Agrons can wield incredible power. Flamethrower, Earthquake, Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Thunder, Sandstorm, Rock Tomb, Hyper Beam. Some command the weather itself, others unleash devastation across entire battlefields. A formation of 50 Agrons striking together, earthquakes shaking the ground, sandstorms raging, blizzards howling, would turn the battlefield into a natural disaster. The knights exchanged stunned glances. A magical beast army, someone murmured. Geralt was the first to grasp the full picture. Your Highness means to train magical beasts in formation, like human soldiers? Lucian nodded. Exactly. We'll subdue and train them as we would men, but treat them not as slaves. They'll be our allies, our strength. Magical Beasta can wield powers no human soldier can: fire, lightning, earthquakes. United under one command, they'll be unstoppable. The knights slowly began to understand, the fear in their eyes turned to awe. Lucian turned to Geralt. I'm entrusting this mission to you. I've already chosen the species we'll start with. He handed Geralt a parchment, Christina's careful drawing of an Agron. These creatures are called Agron, Lucian explained. They feed on iron ore. Provide them with enough, and you'll earn their trust. They live near the mines. Go there, find them, and befriend them. But remember, don't enslave them. Win their loyalty willingly. They must choose you themselves. Understood? Yes, Your Highness, the knights answered in unison. Lucian nodded. The Knight Order can also be expanded if needed.
Gerald, if you run short on iron, draw from the mine reserves.
We won't need the metal for anything else right now.
Yes. Gerald bowed, then departed with his men to carry out the order. Regarding this matter, Lucien felt that he didn't need to give any special instructions. Gerald had his Haxorus at his side, and Ryan had his Simzir. Both men were already experienced in handling Pokémon.
Watching the knights leave, Lucien exhaled slowly.
He was profoundly grateful that he hadn't gone to the territory, the one his late father had originally arranged for him. If he had, by now, he would almost certainly be under the watchful eyes of his two elder brothers. Recruiting soldiers in their presence would have been impossible. Before the war even began, he would have been either taken hostage or quietly disposed of. Just then, Elif, the old steward, returned. Your Highness, Elif reported, bowing, the transaction with the merchants has been completed. Once they return, they'll help us purchase livestock and magical beasts and deliver them to our territory. Lucien leaned back in his chair and nodded with satisfaction. Good work. Even so, he could see the unease on Elif's face. Your Highness. I can't help but wonder, the old man murmured, how His Majesty is faring now. Lucien's gaze softened. Father should be fine, he thought. After all, Victini is still by his side. His two brothers might be ambitious, even extreme, but they wouldn't dare commit the unforgivable sin of patricide. And if the legends were correct, the old king wouldn't die by human hands anyway. In the theatrical tale, the king perished only after expending his own life force to suppress the runaway dragon vein beneath Eindhoek. Until that vein fully erupted, the old man should still be safe. The one Lucien truly pitied was Victini. That poor Pokémon was bound by its own power, forced to remain sealed within the walls of Eindhoek, unable ever to leave. Lucien fell silent, staring at the map on his desk. If only there were some way, any way, to help Victini. But reality soon sank in. They were struggling just to survive themselves. How could they possibly aid Victini? He let out a long breath. Sigh. Elif noticed his expression and tried to comfort him instead. Please don't worry, Your Highness. His Majesty is strong. He'll be all right. Lucien gave a faint, wordless smile. Meanwhile, far to the north of the kingdom, a vast army was marching slowly toward the borderlands. Victini stayed with a court maid, the person the old king had assigned to care for it. The small Pokémon fidgeted, turning to a nearby Pidove. Nini? Pigeon, have you seen Lucien? How is Lucien now? Coo. The Pidove tilted its head blankly. Lucien? The name didn't quite ring a bell. Had it met him before? Seeing this, Victini's little ears drooped. A bad feeling welled in its chest. Nini. Don't tell me you've forgotten the route to him. The Pidove flapped its wings indignantly and cooed loudly as if to say, of course not. Its master Ivan was still waiting for it out there. Hearing that, Victini's eyes brightened again. Nini. It turned toward the distant horizon, the vast expanse of mountains and forests beyond the royal city, and whispered softly. Nini. Great, I would soon be able to see Lucien again. Chapter 100, Anna's Growth. After sending everyone off, Lucien sat alone in the Lord's Hall, lost in thought about the road ahead. Time was short, and the burden heavy. Though the war had yet to break out, the north-to-south conflict brewing across the Unova region was already beginning to stir. Before the flames of war could sweep across his land, his territory had to grow stronger, fast. The Knights of the Order, under Gerald's command, now numbered nearly 70. Each one was a trained warrior, but Lucien knew that wasn't enough. He planned to reform them, to reshape the Knights into a true fighting force that could survive the coming storm. The ground troops, led by Agrane units, would form the backbone of the army. But to rule the skies, he needed something more. They needed an air corps. In Unova, the Rufflet, known as the Arrogant Chick, and its evolved form, Braviary, the Warrior of the Sky, were prime candidates. There were also Altariat and Skarmory, both capable of high-altitude attacks and swift reconnaissance. Flying-type Pokémon would give them eyes in the sky, able to scout the battlefield, relay movements, and rain destruction upon enemies from above.
Fortunately, near this territory, early-stage Pokémon like Pidove and Swablu were quite common. With patience and care, he could tame them easily. But raising them, that would be another story. Resources were already stretched thin. Agron alone devoured a shocking amount of iron ore every day.
Feeding and training more Pokémon would push their reserves to the brink.
Lucian sighed.
In the end, everything depends on how quickly this territory develops. For now, he could only hope that Zack's caravan would soon return, with livestock, supplies, and a few Machoke to help with construction. As for himself, he couldn't afford to rest either. Traveling to Lacunosa village to seek Kyurem would be anything but simple. Kyurem's true strength, Lucian knew, far surpassed what the games portrayed. In the games, Glaciate might only deal 65 power, but in reality, it could freeze half of Unova in an instant. A legendary Pokémon wasn't just a battle companion, it was a force of nature. And Kyurem, unlike gentle Xerneas, was a being of isolation and cold wrath. One mistake in front of it could mean instant death. He clenched his fist. Before I face it, I must become stronger. The training for Dratini and Snivy. I'll have to step it up, he muttered. He rose from his seat, ready to begin the day's drills, when he caught sight of a small figure lingering by the door.
Anna.
The girl froze under his gaze, clutching her hands nervously.
Their eyes met. She swallowed hard, then blurted out, Prince Lucian, is it true? Is another war about to begin? Lucian blinked, caught off guard. Anna quickly waved her hands. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I came to report about Zoroa's training, but I overheard a little by accident. Lucian sighed and rubbed his temples. This isn't something a child should worry about. Anna was only 10, far too young to bear the weight of war. Even if she had Zoroa by her side, he could never send her into battle. War wasn't like the stories or the games, people didn't just faint. They died. But Anna shook her head fiercely. No. Zoroa and I can fight too. Teacher, we want to protect our home, the one everyone built together. Lucian looked at her in surprise. Anna's voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word. You're the best king in the world, Your Highness. I don't understand politics, but I know this much, you gave us food when we were starving, medicine when we were sick, and hope when we had none. You taught us to live alongside the magical beasts. You gave us a home. Her small fists tightened. Beside her, Zoroa's eyes glowed with the same fiery determination. So please, let us fight. If Zoroa and I can defeat you, then promise you'll let us join the knights. Even if it costs my life, I'll protect you, and everyone else. Zoroa. The little Pokémon barked, echoing her resolve. Lucian stood silently for a long moment. Then, at last, he asked softly, Does your mother know about this? Anna nodded without hesitation. She'll support us. She believes in Zoroa and me. Lucian exhaled slowly, his expression complicated. Very well. I'll give you a chance. Anna's eyes lit up instantly. The two finally chose the riverbank, the same one where Dratini often trained, as their battleground. Behind them stretched the growing territory, half-built houses, bustling workers, and flourishing farmland swaying in the wind. Since Larvesta had only just hatched, Lucian's available team consisted of just Dratini and Servine, but that was more than enough to face an ordinary Zoroa. For this match, Lucian decided to lead with Dratini. Anna, he said with a calm smile, show us your strength. There were no formal rules for Pokémon battles in this era. The moment Lucian's words fell, Anna acted without hesitation. Zoroa, use extrasensory. Zoroa. With a sharp cry, psychic energy swirled in Zoroa's mouth, condensing into a nearly invisible sphere of mental force before shooting straight toward Dratini. But as Anna's teacher, Lucian knew her battle habits better than anyone, he could practically predict her commands. Dratini, evade. Having shed its skin 3 times already, Dratini's movements were smooth and lightning fast.
It twisted its serpentine body and slid aside, the psychic blast skimming harmlessly past.
Ha! Anna gasped, eyes wide.
Lucian chuckled lightly.
Focus, Anna. Daydreaming in battle will only get you hurt. Dratini, Thunder Wave, then follow with Dragon Tail. Wah!
Before Anna could react, a thin arc of yellow electricity shot from Dratini's body, striking Zoroa dead on.
ZZZZT. The jolt sent sparks dancing across Zoroa's fur. Its body froze, paralyzed. Zoroa! Anna cried. Lucian's expression hardened. Now! Dratini's tail shimmered with roaring draconic energy. It coiled and leapt, slamming its glowing tail across Zoroa's small frame, sending it tumbling backward into the grass.
It's over, Lucian said simply. But then, he noticed something strange.
Anna was smiling.
Hee teacher, she said proudly, we've already figured out your battle style with Dratini. The world around them began to distort. The fallen Zoroa shimmered like a mirage before fading into mist. From behind Lucian, another Zoroa stepped out of the shadows, completely unscathed, its eyes gleaming with mischievous purple light. Lucian blinked, then let out a soft laugh.
So that's how it is. Illusion, huh? Zoroa's innate ability, capable of deceiving sight and perception.
Anna had tricked him flawlessly.
I didn't expect you two to pull that off, Lucian admitted, smiling wryly. But your illusion has worn off. You won't be able to use it again for a while. So tell me, what will you do now?
He knew the move was mentally exhausting for a young Zoroa, it couldn't maintain 2 illusions in succession.
Anna simply grinned, her confidence unshaken. Then we'll just fight head-on, she declared. Zoroa, show our teacher what we've got. Zoroa. Zoroa's form flickered, and then multiplied. 1 became 2. 2 became 4. Then 8.
Within seconds, the battlefield was surrounded by a dozen shadowy silhouettes, each bearing sharp little teeth.
Lucian narrowed his eyes. Double team, impressive.
That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated to a Medieval Pokémon World.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned.
Quick reminder.
The series What If Fishing System in Food Wars World is now on hold, since we're caught up with the author.
So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these 3 fanfics. What if creating the strongest Strawhat crew by reading manga? What if transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body? What if martial artist Reborn is Kenichi Shirahama? Please vote in the poll and let me know which stories you'd like to see next. I'll take the second pick and start working on that series next.
Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released 1 day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.